Welcome to today's Tuesday Tech Talk for Parents. As always, this session is being recorded. You can mute, but also feel free to unmute, jump in, or use the chat box for questions. Today, we'll be talking about deciding on devices. Is your child ready for a smartphone? And if you already gave them a smartphone, that's okay. You can, maybe there's some helpful tips on how to move forward and some guidance there with some resources. So when I was looking up the purpose or thinking about what is the purpose of a cell phone and what would a child essentially need it for, I looked up like the definition. So it was pretty much like keeping in touch with family members or conducting business or having access away from your house. If you think about calling or sending a message where you're not confined to the cord phone, most of the time it's just to make sure or check in, to relay information. So in the past, these were the old phones, right? I remember having the Nokia right there in the middle and then kind of transferred, had the Nextel. It was a radio, like it kind of took a step backwards and we were going beep, beep. And then I could just check in where I was. But even at that, it was like, again, just trying to communicate for safety, essentially, or conducting business. I think that were the two general reasons. And if you take a look at the landscape, I had something similar like this in our very first session, and we had the adult view and the student view for internet. But I added here communication. This one is for voice calling, video calling now, email, texting, and then social media. But if you look at the student's view, voice call mostly to parents, but they have video call, which I thought I had added in there. Video call is actually one of their main ways to communicate. They don't actually pick up the phone and hold it to their ear. They would rather hold it out in front of them and see the person. So I thought that was interesting talking to the students. DMing, they made direct message more so than they would email. I think email is last on that list. So again, a device that's on the go. So what happened to the pager? Like, I appreciate the pager. I never had one. I really wanted one, but it was just, again, a communication. I think because it was a one-way, it was very hard to go back and forth, but just relaying information, like tell your kid to come home by a certain time. But technology is what it is now, and we have such more devices that can do more dynamic things. So here are just two reasons why a parent may give an elementary student a cell phone, and that's what we're going to focus on, the elementary students. So number one seems to be there's a complex caregiving arrangements, whether the parents are divorced or separated, or that they're working and that there's another caretaker in there. They still feel the need, they need to communicate when they're away from the parent. Another major one is peer pressure. And I think that's where even my daughter, who's in first grade, is pressuring me, saying that other kids have a phone and she wants one. So she's grade 1. So I think that's interesting, grade 1, but she's also friends with kids who are 9 or 10 years old. And she's almost 7. So other kids have the smartphone, thus wanting to be part of the group and not being left out. So I want to continue to say we are in a non-judgment zone. If you've already given your child a smartphone, no matter what age it is, okay, it's okay. And maybe there are some tips and boundaries that maybe you need to put in place, or it's going well. There was somebody who filled out the feedback and said that they are actually have a child in the lower school and it's going pretty well, and they have set some boundaries with their smartphone device. Okay, so what were some of those boundaries that you might have? One, they can't take it to school. I thought that was interesting. In a few slides, I'll tell you that they really can't use their cell phone at school. Now, if they do it, that's a different story, but there's school policy. And then the phone is also collected during the evening. Once they're home, they don't need the cell phone. They're back with their parent. They don't actually need it. So what are some regrets? They in this one Facebook group, I know many parents had talked about they had regrets at giving it at the younger ages, and it was mostly social emotional things, but the access to information readily, and then the online situations such as bullying. And bullying has a quite a definition, online bullying, as opposed to just like comments that make you uncomfortable. So I think those could be kind of put under the umbrella of social emotional thinking. So I'm going to take a breath here because I know I'm going a little quick, but we're going to go over some data just from the lower school. Okay. So we surveyed 196 students of grades 3, 4, 5. I did not ask the question to grades 1 and 2 if they had a cell phone. It came out through conversation. So I have a little bit of anecdotal data. There's not that many in grade 1, maybe one or two students in grade 1 per class. Grade 2, it does increase a little bit. But for grade 3, you can see pretty evenly distributed amongst who took the survey. And then the question was, do you have a smartphone? Interesting enough, they didn't know how to define a smartphone. So I had to put the extra in there after seeing a few classes. The example will be iPhone or Android. And then they were able to answer on their own. So 64%, more than half. It's not surprising to me that more than half of grades 3 through 5 have a cell phone. But when I wanted to dive in deeper to the data to see what grade levels had the most, like was it mostly 4th and 5th, and 3rd is there. So here's the data for broken down by grade level. And you can kind of take a minute to look at that. It's about where I would think it would. Majority of grade 5 have a cell phone. And then some grade 3 have a cell phone. And then 4th is right in the middle. Okay, so that was 60 of the 64%. That's the breakdown. So of the 64%, almost half is grade 5. Here it is, comparison side by side for cell phone to no cell phone per grade level. So what I see here, I'm going to leave it for a second. There's about 75 students in each grade. So some observations that I saw, just taking my takeaways, were that grade 3 seems to be the bend in the school. Grade 3 gets the laptops. Grade 3 is right in the middle between pre-K and 5. So maybe that's the beginning of when they receive cell phones. Grade 2 may have a little earlier, but it starts to be a bigger jump as you move through grade 4. And then by grade 5, almost all of them, majority of grade 5 has a cell phone. So I think that's going to be a conflict if you are a family who wants to really wait till middle school. It's going to be that push and tug with your child at home. So by grade 5, most of them already have a cell phone. So some anecdotal, as I said, grade 1, just talking to them, 1, maybe 2. And interesting, one child said to another, "You have a cell phone? You're 6." And it was interesting coming from another 6-year-old. But there are some that have it for certain reasons, or have it because the older sibling has it, or have it because it was their parents' old cell phone and now they have it. So here are some questions to consider if you are thinking of giving your child a smartphone. 1, it's responsibility. Okay. Is it when they need to call when they're away from you? Do they lose things easy? I'm not sure I would give a child something that's worth valuable money if they often lose things. Okay. And again, you can read through these through this slide deck when I share it back to you later today. Okay. And then do they follow the limits that you set? Because you are in charge. You're the parent. Here's the school policy. I pulled this straight from the handbook. So at school, there is actually no reason for them to have a mobile device. or a cell phone. And if they lose it, something happens, it is not, the school says they're not liable. So the purpose of having a school phone is typically not during the day. It would be that after school, what happens after school. Now, there are students that use their cell phone, they go to their backpack, or they go get their cell phone when we used to have lockers, and they would message their parent about forgetting something. They would use it in the bathroom, and all of those are kind of hidden. They're not supposed to happen. So again, cell phones are really not permitted in the lower school, and middle school may have a different policy on that. I do know they have them. They're not supposed to have them out. And same thing, they're not to be visible unless they're needed for school purpose. PC Mag has a list of different devices. So if you're somebody who's really starting to be conflicted on what device is best for you and your family, this is a great article that goes through each of them, has prices, comparisons, and a little description. It doesn't, what I would have liked to see maybe is a little bit more age. Like, at what age might you get this? So I made a little GIF, and the full article, you'll be able to click here to see the comparison. And then this next slide gives some alternatives, which I found kind of cool, but the students would not. They might feel that it's not the iPhone, it's not the Samsung Galaxy. That's not what their friends have. And now they have something, but it's not up to par. But what I think is nice about this is it's limiting. So Gab Wireless has something that you can, a device for communication, text only, you cannot download any apps. And then another phone that looks similar to the iPhone is Pinwheel. Again, no games or things like that. So they both have location services, and they both are able to text or phone call. And I think that's about the limitations that its allowance has. So here's some reasons to delay a cell phone as long as you can. The first one that comes up is addictive and academic distractions. I can tell you personally that happens to myself. When I'm working, I take a break and I have my cell phone, and now I'm scrolling on something, and it's just a brain break for me, but then it becomes a time consumption. Was that only supposed to be a 2 to 5 minute brain break? And now I'm on 10 minutes. At home, same thing. I'm easily distracted, and then I lose myself, because that's kind of what these apps are meant to be, and that's how they make their money. There's also altering the brain and impairing sleep. They've talked about the blue light. You see, I wear glasses. I don't actually wear glasses outside of my office. These are just for the computer, because I'm staring at the computer all day. I've noticed that there's between this light and the light that comes off the laptop, I start squinting, and there's something correlation between sleeping and having the bright light, and maybe you don't get into REM sleep as easily. So the brain is also adapting to all of that. And for the young children, their brain is really developing still, and you don't want that. You want to limit that light and through their eyes. The anxiety and depression is being seen at a younger age. There have been times that social media on their own accounts, or things that they see may not be up to par with body image, or in their mind, they're interpreting comments or texts to them, or they're put in situations that in the end may be cyberbullying, or just might be that miscommunication where it doesn't make them feel good, and they're trying to compare themselves to everything that's happening in their device. And then there's the exposure to sexual content, which is happening at an earlier age. These were all adapted from the Wait Until 8th campaign, and there's more details there. And then the link at the bottom is actually an iPhone free gift guide, which is interesting. I think we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but this is happening more and more with like Christmas or birthdays, doing experiences, gifting experiences instead of something. So it just gives you a list of things to keep going if you're struggling with what next. So a funny story talking about the gift is Reagan. She may kill me for this story. She's wanting an iPhone. She has a business and she's going to make money and she's going to save up her own $1,000 to buy the iPhone. Or she's asked grandma to buy it for her. So grandma calls, we call her Lola. Lola calls and asks Reagan, what do you want for your birthday? And she says, you already know, Lola, it starts with an I. And Lola says, oh, I can't afford that. And Reagan says, oh, well, you have Louis Vuitton purse. I mean, so she's starting to correlate certain things with how much money is and how much a device is, but she's still 6 or 7. So I've told my mom, if she even gets that, I'm selling it, putting the money in the bank because it's not age appropriate. How long can I hold on to that is a different story. And it is whatever fits your family. So again, the no judgment zone is what is your family values and how does that fit your family and your family's needs. So if you're thinking about getting your child a cell phone, the first thing as any device is set the ground rules. You are the parent, you are the owner of the device, you're paying the bill. Even if Reagan purchases the device, there's a monthly fee to that. Who's paying that? So we got to make the rules and the expectations, and it's always best, just like the classroom, that we do it together. So it's a contract. And then what does that mean? So you have to kind of be explicit and then go over the scenarios again. Place parent controls where possible, but remember those aren't always the end all be all. There's some loopholes in there. And then check in with the device often. And then knowing what the consequences are up front. If they break the contract, the expectation, what are the ramifications? And then is it they lose it? Is it they lose it forever? Or is they lose it for a time period? And then what is that connection from breaking the rule to earning it back? Maybe they have to do things to earn it back, but you want to set those consequences up front so that they know. And then collecting the cell phone in the evening, that seems to be the biggest recommendation from other parents and experts. Again, they don't need the phone, their device, while laying in bed or going to bed. And then actually one of our parents, Holly, has actually taught me in the last week, setting up a different Apple ID for each of your children and then tethering your account to it actually gives you a little bit more parent controls that instead of having a shared one. So my iPad that the kids use is actually on my Apple ID. So when I set up some notification or rules for the iPad, they're able to get around it because now they can read and they're pushing bypass or set more time. It wasn't actually locking the iPad. So I have to go reverse that and make their own Apple ID. So thank you, Holly, who's on this call, for that tip.
Can I pipe in and ask, Holly, was that part of setting up family sharing?
I think I had family sharing before they had their own ID. I can't remember for sure, but I do have both. They have their own IDs that I have family sharing on, and I control their time limits on their different apps and have to approve any purchases, that kind of thing.
Right. So their own IDs are something at iCloud.com, right?
That's right.
And that allows them to use FaceTime and all that separate from you, correct?
You
allow it?
If I allow it.
Gotcha.
But I can just.
So it was interesting. I was trying to limit the time initially on YouTube because that's our rabbit hole. And I set it for 15 minutes and then I looked at my watch and I saw 15 minutes had passed and Reagan was like, oh, you just got to push this button and say, you know, remind me again and add more time, 15 minutes. And so smart. So then she teaches the other one who cannot read. She just shows him what button to press and he has letter recognition. So now they both have bypassed this. So the parent controls, you can group the apps with allowance. You can set notification rules, which means that they are or allowed or not allowed to do certain things. And then time is also one of the biggest features there. This campaign was something that I found, and I found that I'm hoping and wanting a parent to kind of take on this with me or for us, and see where we go, especially maybe in grade 1 and 2. But it's called the Wait Until 8th campaign. And it was from parents in Texas that got together and they banded together and they said, hey, we don't want our kids to have a smartphone, but if we all do it, if we all make a pact and we sign this pledge and we're going to wait until 8th, then there's no more comparison. There's none of these kids would have it, or very few would have it. And then they could move through 8th grade and then all get the phone at the same time. So I'm just going to play a little bit about this because I thought it was really interesting, and I found it within PC Mag. So it was an article that I read. It's not as outwardly on social media as much as I thought it could be or should be. But it depends again on our values of why we need the cell phone.
Of course, there is a little bit of pushback for parents that have already made this decision because they do feel like there's a judgment element, but this is one path that you can take. This isn't the path, but if you would like to wait, please join us.
So I'm here with Brooke Shannon from Wait Until 8th. I'm so excited to talk to you in person. We've talked on the phone a lot over the years. And I want to start by just asking you first to explain what Wait Until 8th is.
Wait Till 8th is a parent-led pledge to help empower parents to delay when children get a smartphone. So the concept is you're pledging to hold off until at least 8th grade before you give your son or your daughter a smartphone.
And tell me about how this idea first started. You're a mother.
Yes.
When did it first occur to you that smartphone use might be a problem for especially younger kids?
Well, I'm a mother of 3 daughters, and the campaign in my household started a few years ago. And it started when my daughter was in 3rd grade, and a few of her friends were starting to get shiny new iPhones, and the pressure was on. And I was getting peppered with questions every few days of when she could get a smartphone. And it just felt so young and not right. I just always saw kids completely sucked into this vortex of an online world and not really living life as a kid. And I just wanted life to look a little different for my kiddo. And one day I was driving past my daughter's future middle school, and I was so discouraged because what I saw was all these kids flooding out at the end of the school day, all of them with their heads down, nobody with their heads up. And as a mom, it just was kind of sad to see that this was like the road ahead for my daughters. And I just wanted it to look differently. And so I emailed, I don't know, maybe 20 or so moms that night and just started taking their temperature on what they were thinking about smartphones and if they had already crossed that bridge or when they were planning to do so. And out of that conversation came this idea of what if we held off together until a certain point.
So a lot of people would say like, wow, 3rd grade, you already started this conversation, but have you found that this conversation should happen at a younger age, or were people surprised when you emailed them and asked them about this?
Well, you would be surprised. The average age a child receives a smartphone is 10 years old. And that's going to keep going down, I think, unless there is a cultural shift on this issue. And so while the national average is 10, I would say in more affluent communities, it's even younger. And in our community, we were seeing, 1st and 2nd graders with phones already. So it was a really good time. I think the longer you hold off on this decision, the harder it gets to be. Because once you get to about 5th or 6th grade, in many communities, most children already have the phones, and it's hard to rally support in that situation.
So I'm going to pause there. She says everything that we researched within the school. So we have a few 1st and 2nd graders. By 3rd grade, we've lost it to even try a campaign like this. There's already majority of the kids that have it. But if you are a grade 1 or grade 2 parent interested in this, contact me and we can see where we get started on that. And if we can culture shift our community. This is a personal kind of information here, not as much as what the St. Andrews School is saying, but as a representative of both the parent hat and the teaching hat, I would love to see what this may look like in grades 1 and 2. Okay, so at the bottom right-hand corner, there is click there to learn more.
Of course, there is a little bit of pushback.
So for more resources this week, I found Protect Young Eyes. Mostly it's about online danger. So you can click there and it'll take you to that website. Lots of good information, common sense media as always. And then the Center for Humane Technology, I believe that's the one that made the Netflix show. If somebody could remind me what that name was called of the
Social Dilemma, was it?
thank you. Yes, Social Dilemma. They have a podcast now called Your Undivided Attention. And so I want to say there's like 20 something episodes now. I have not listened to them, but it sounded very interesting. And then if you are liking these webinars that I have hosted, I found more webinars for you that you can join that are free. And ironically, they're about the same time slot. Most of them are at noon, but they also have some early 9 a.m. and then some of them have the late 8 p.m. But you can click on that tile and it'll take you to that website, and that's hosted by Protect Young Eyes. Any questions for this segment? All right. So our next and last Tuesday Tech Talk is responsibility and courage, having difficult conversations between parents, students, and maybe the school. So this is where I've talked to the students. I've asked them questions on what if and what happens and what do they do. And I hope you are interested in joining next week to see what they said. Okay, that is all for us for today's talk, and I'll see you next Tuesday.